Hi, and welcome back to Insights podcast. I am really excited to share with you my lovely friend Dan Collins. Hi, Dan. How you doing?
Hi, Barry. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well.
Thanks very much for coming on to Insights, Dan. I suppose we should better introduce yourself for those people that don't know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Dan. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, but I've lived in Scotland since 2005. I live in Edinburgh. I am a musician, so I'm a singer-songwriter. I perform a lot of different sort of pubs and clubs, weddings and festivals, a little bit of busking. Just anywhere I can make noise, I'll be there. I've in the last couple of years got back into acting. I've started doing stand-up comedy. I do lots of different things. I run a few different promotions. One of my favorite things I do is an organization called the Sad Song Club, which is an open mic that meets every fortnight in Leith. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. Most notably, and important for today's podcast, is I am the creator and performer of a piece of theatre called Dune the Musical, which I debuted earlier this year.
So, doing the musical, why now?
So I would love to say that I had the cunning to plan this to exploit the free publicity of the recent Hollywood adaptation, but it didn't happen like that. It all started a few years ago. My favorite band, an American rock band called Tool, released a new album, and one of the tracks on the album was a French phrase. So I typed it into Google to translate it, and it translates as litany against fear. Now, the first thing that comes up in the Google search results is that the litany against fear is a mantra that is used by characters in the Dune universe. Now, I'd heard of Dune before. I've always been a science fiction fan. One of my friends actually has all the Dune books. There are dozens of them. So I was aware of the franchise, but had never read it. And I thought, well, if my favorite band like this, then I will give it a shot. And I was just, spellbound. The book inspires all kinds of fanaticism, and as an experience, reading the book it can be transformative. Along the way, it all kind of started as a joke. Like all the best things I do in life, I was sitting around one day and I came up with this idea that if you take the word Dune and you add an exclamation mark to the end, it becomes a musical. So like Oliver, Oklahoma, Dune. And with that little quip, that's where it started. That was the kind of the first sort of kernel. I picked up a guitar and just started like playing around with it, and before I knew it, I'd started writing a whole bunch of songs for a musical that was, well, that we're now here talking about.
I suppose what's really interesting about Dune, there's so much to it. And I've seen the movie as well. So, what challenges did you face when adapting this huge complex of a story of Dune to fit it into a small stage show?
All right, yeah, good question. Yeah, famously, Dune is a very heavy, very big. Well, I've got the book here. I know the viewers at home won't be able to see it, but it's about
Mammoth.
yeah, it's about 500, 600 pages, and it's a very complex world. Like it's one of the things that the author gets a lot of uh, praise for is the quality of his world building. It's set 10,000 years in the future, and in the opening chapters, there's a very deliberate effort to confuse the reader. Like you're not supposed to understand what's going on, and if you've seen the movies, that's often the challenge of the movies is to try and make it understandable, but you're not supposed to understand it. It's not. You're actually supposed to just sort of accept it and go along with it. So you've got this really big world, multiple planets. There are lots of different factions, political, religious orders. There's implications of magic and mystique. There's crazy technology that everyone has access to. There are plots and assassinations, and there's all kinds of intrigue. There's a lot going on. It's very, very complex. Where I kind of like one of the little clues that I had that was able to sort of help me condense the work into something more sort of bite-sized is at the start of every chapter of the book, there is a quote from a book within the book. Again, part of the world building is that each chapter starts with this little quote from like another in-universe book that gives you a little bit of flavor as to what's coming up. And in chapter 3, the chapter where my character is first introduced, there's a little clue. And the clue is that the character has gone on to write collections of songs for children, children's songs. So he's written songs that will be an accompaniment to children's education about what happens in the book. And the good thing about kids' music is that it's really good for exposition. Like you can tell all kinds of stories in a very simple, straightforward way, and that's kind of where it started. The other thing I tend to say is that music itself is a little bit magic. It's probably the closest thing that we have to real magic in the world, in that when someone starts to play and when someone starts to sing, our brains go into a different gear. We're able to warp people's perception of time, warp people's perception of emotion, and importantly, give people a sense. Like, again, this idea of the big world. How do we give you that big world? Well, I can give it to you in notes. I can use this strange instrument in front of me, and using a very a very unusual type of mathematics that we call music. I can put these ideas in your head and take you to a far off desert world that's crawling with giant worms and all kinds of other colorful sci-fi nonsense.
So, how did you approach composing the music for Dune the musical? Obviously, you said it's based on this children's um, thought process from the book, but there's so much to the book. Where did you begin with composing the music?
So to begin with, like I said, it started off with this idea of children's books and the idea of parody and making it kind of fun and accessible. It all started as a joke, but the character that in the show, the narrator of the show that I perform as, is called Gurney Halleck, and Gurney Halleck in the book is a singer songwriter. So straight off the bat, there's my favorite character. Even on the first reading, I have an instant affinity to that character. He has he plays an instrument called a balisette. Now, there's no such thing as a balisette in real life, but my later research would turn up that the closest thing that we'd have to a balisette is actually what would be called a baroque guitar. Now, a baroque guitar, without getting into too many of the details, it's not a million miles off a normal guitar, maybe a few tweaks here and there. But one of the big differences is that they're very hard to come by and quite expensive. My budget is much more humble than that, and unfortunately, the luthiers on the tops of the Italian mountains who make these custom instruments didn't get much trade off of me. But what we have is a character who, throughout the book, is presented as, well, one, quite a playful character. In the most recent adaptation, he's played by Josh Brolin. In the 80s film, he was played by Patrick Stewart. He's always presented as quite a stern, stoic, military force. Now, he is a soldier as well, but in the book, he's a man of terrific humor. He is very, like, he's whimsical and naughty. He knows lots of cheeky songs and limericks, and they keep him around because he can sing. Not only is he good with a sword, not only is he a very trustworthy individual, but one of the things I recognized about him that was in this futuristic world of people with incredible abilities and immense power, one of the most valuable characters is the guy who can sing. It's the guy who just picks up this weird little instrument and starts, singing little songs for people. And it occurred to me that, I mean, again, taking from the text, as well as writing kid songs, there's a reference to a collection of songs that he wrote called, it's called Tone Poems for Sad Times. Now, I mentioned the Sad Song Club earlier. Again, there's that connection, that affinity. Here we have a man who balances tragedy and comedy, someone who is, he has one foot in the sort of the caring, lovable uncle character role, but also he's a soldier with a tragic backstory. So of course he's going to write fun songs for the kids, but what does he write for himself? What stories does he have to tell? As a songwriter, with like I've been writing songs since I was a kid. It's always really interesting to find new ways of approaching work, new ways of thinking about music. And so for me, in terms of like composing for June, I just kind of had to let the songs come, and they came in a very unusual order. So the first song I wrote is the third song. The next song I wrote is the last song. The next song I wrote after that was like number 7 or 8, and then it just kind of piece by piece started to come together. In total, I wrote probably about 25 songs, 24, 25 thereabouts. Um, some of them I didn't fully finish. There's at least 5 of them that are they're among my favorite songs I've ever written, but they're not in the show because they don't contribute to the narrative. One of the challenges that I set myself was that the show has to be an hour. I don't want people sitting there. You know, I don't have the same amount of flexibility as Denis Villeneuve. We don't have 3 hours to rattle through this. It's going to be, we'll do it in 1 hour. We'll do it at the festival. The most obtuse idea possible. Because of that, the songs tend to be very direct. They're all very much grounded in the universe. I use lots of different uh, musical motifs that are intended to communicate very specific ideas about the part of the story, or the broader world that we're in. And moreover, they are quite short songs. So there's a couple of songs that are about a minute long. I think the longest song in the show is 3 minutes or thereabouts. And that was actually a really big part of the writing process. When I felt comfortable that I had all the songs. The songs came first. Like I wrote the music before I wrote any of the storytelling elements. When I had my songs lined up, I then timed them. I played them with a stopwatch and timed them so I could then work out how much time I had left to work with for speech, and how many words per minute I would need to average to get the whole thing to work. It was quite I mean, not a strict mathematical process, but I guess it was very different. Like one of the things that's really interesting with creativity, as much as we think about um, being free and loose with our creativity, I think that when we impose restrictions on ourselves, that ironically gives us more freedom, more impetus to operate. So yeah, I mean, it was a really good experience. I think like the songs that I've written, I'm really proud of, and I'm in the process of recording them now because I would really like to be able to, have have an original soundtrack, buy a cassette or a CD with my characters' songs on it. Yeah, really exciting.
What were some of the key themes that you wanted to explore in the musical? Because as you say, this is a massive book with lots of different stories happening. So how do you kind of go, how do we condense this 3 hour movie into a 1 hour stage performance and hear the key themes? Like that's a massive task.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't easy. I think my what I did was focus mostly on the character. Like I said, like with the universe of Dune being so big, I mean, we have like themes of political power and religious control. We have, like I said, multiple factions all vying for control of vital natural resources, and there's romance and intrigue and mystery, and the book itself has a very important place culturally, particularly with the psychedelic community. It was released in the 60s, and there's all kinds of like internal monologues and inner world thinking that goes on in the show, or in the book rather, that I try to bring into the show. But because like I decided early on that the only way that I could make this work was for Gurney to tell the story. So it's not when it's when we call I call it Dune the musical, but there's no chorus line. It's not a panto. It's a story told by one character, and it's his perspective, and his perspective is very different. He doesn't really get too involved in the politics and the power struggles of the world. He has his own set of experiences, and I trust that he's very comfortable with the decisions he's made in his life and where he is, and he recognizes his role within all of this. In terms of the themes that I wanted to kind of focus on, I really, yeah, again, try and keep it personal. There are themes that come up in the show about loss, about trauma. The character has a dark side. There is a very, like, as much as like the first few songs, the opening act, if you will, is very playful, like the character himself, very playful, but there is just this undercurrent of sadness. There's something not right. Um, that's a really big part of it. One of the other things I really wanted to focus on um, was the concept of dreams. Because this is one of the things that comes up in the book, in the movies, is the protagonist Paul Atreides, the little boy, the hero of our story, is he's troubled with dreams of the future, and to begin with, I play this for laughs. Like, you know, he's dreaming about the future, and he's got girls in his dreams. Now it's getting serious. But actually, Paul's dreams of the future are terrifying. On the one hand, yeah, he meets the girl of his dreams, but also he sees a universe on fire. He sees armies marching across barren planets, torching everything in their wake, in his name. So this idea of, you know, what you want and what you get aren't necessarily the same thing. That perhaps even the idea of be careful what you wish for. One of my favorite phrases that I like to think about, you know, I meditate on, is the idea that the genie will always give you what you wish for, but he won't necessarily give you what you want. The Dune itself is quite a subversive novel. And so there are moments of subversion. There are lots of twists and turns within my performance in Dune the musical, where the mood will change from, again, playful and funny to being very, very serious, and back again. And it's this idea that, you know, you can't quite predict what's going to happen. You just have to settle in and enjoy the experience.
The show was at the Fringe Festival. Tell me about your experience of the Fringe, because I think for me, I love talking about the Fringe because it's one of the hardest gigs you'll ever do in the world. It needs to make a profit, but for small shows, it's perfect to get audience feedback before you decide what you do with the performance going forward. So tell me, how did it do at the Fringe?
Oh, it was great. I had a great time. So I mean, like I said, I've lived in Edinburgh for like maybe 18 years now, and I've got lots of friends in theatre, um, comedians, music. I've performed at lots of fringe adjacent events over the years. This year, like June the Musical was my first show where it was like a proper, actual, factual show. Um, I did it through the Peter Buckley Hill Free Fringe, which is, I guess, it was one of the kind of more DIY, uh, airing on punk productions, or organizations. And I was able to. I've got a couple of friends in town who own a coffee shop, and they've got a little space through the back of their coffee shop where we were able to squeeze, I think it was about 50 chairs. We started off with about 35 or 40, but because we were getting really good numbers, we had to go get more chairs. So it was a very sweaty month. I think like Edinburgh during August is, I mean, like, you'll be aware, like, it's an incredible atmosphere. You've got hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people descend on the city all at once, all crammed into these tiny little spaces. I was very, like I said, very fortunate to have friends in the city who were able to accommodate. I made lots of new friends as well. It's a great place. You get to network with people and uh, share your art, learn about other people's experiences and products. It was really good. Like, overall, like I had a great time. I did the show like 6 times a week, so it was every day with a day off now and then. And broadly speaking, the audiences loved it. It was really, really good. I was really, really pleased with it. I think, like, in part because of the free publicity from the recent Hollywood adaptation, and in part because, like I mentioned earlier, that Dune inspires fanatic loyalty. There are people who like they it's the the first thing they'll look for, is there anything Dune related at this festival. If it has a voracious fan base, even after the original author of the book passed on. The author's son took over the franchise and has since published dozens of books, which, from a critical standpoint, probably aren't that great compared to the original, but they sell. So I, uh, I'm very, very fortunate in that I didn't have to do too much work to promote the show. I had set up the social media and made contacts in various online communities. So I got to meet people who in real life who I had only just met online previously. But broadly, I mean, it was a absolutely amazing experience. I've been able to, like, I was able to pay my rent with it, which was really good. And I think, being as it was through the free fringe, there's a lot less kind of official stuff that you have to go through. I'm not sure if I'm quite ready for the world of professional theater, or maybe they're not ready for me. That's a question for another day.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you was, obviously there is a cult following to Dune. Um, what were their reactions, the audience reactions, once they've seen the show?
So, I love this. So there's two things in particular that stand out. So one, there's the reaction during the show, and then there's the reaction afterwards. So the starting with the reaction during, one of the really key components of the performance is eye contact. And in the opening, in the intro to the first song, one of the things I do very deliberately is try and make eye contact with everybody in the room at least once during those opening bars of music, just to try and, right, we need to start this. I need to keep your attention for the hour, and I need to keep an eye on who's really paying attention. And you try and spot who are the people in the room, who are the hardcore fans, who are the casuals, who's just been dragged along by their partner or by a friend. um, and that was really satisfying. Like, because you write these things in isolation for the most part. Like, you don't necessarily get an awful lot of feedback from people. Um, and then suddenly you're having to do it in a small room, um, and you can see the whites of their eyes, and it's fantastic. I mean, again, like I said, there's moments in the show that I would describe, these twists and turns, and getting to watch people react in real time. Not just laughing at jokes. Like, there are a few jokes in the show that, like, there's one in particular. Can't give it away because it'd be sacrilege to let that one slip. But the biggest joke in the show you will only get if you have read multiple books in the Dune series. It's such a niche joke that, like, not everybody gets it. And depending on who's in the room, like, if the audience is mostly newcomers to the series, that joke doesn't land. It's not funny. It becomes a very serious moment. But if there's enough, like, sort of, fans of the series who've read on past the first book, that joke is a standout moment, and it's like one of my one of my favorite moments in it. One of the things, again, to gauging people's reaction during the show, is watching how when did they pick up on the fact that I know where this story goes. So one of the reasons Dune is famous and has that prominent cult following is that it has a really subversive ending. And I like, throughout the show, there are little sort of teasers that I try and, like, hint to the audience that I don't know, that maybe I'm going to give you a nice sort of friendly, fuzzy, happy ever after ending, and it's all going to be fine. And watching people realize that, oh, no, we're sticking to the book. This is gonna be this is gonna, you don't know how I'm gonna do it, but giving people these little clues, and just watching people go from a kind of a passive state of observing the play to starting to lean forward and smirk with the expectation of what's coming. After the shows, like, people were absolutely delighted. I gave away so many posters. Like, I got a bunch of posters printed for the show. I ended up, in the first week, I had to order more posters because people wanted to keep them as souvenirs. I got loads of, like, phone numbers, email addresses from people who want to set up a performance in their town or whatever. One of my favorite little stories was so there's a guy. I'll name check him now so he knows I'm thinking about him. Keith from Essex, um, who I think might be my biggest fan. And he showed up and he thought, "Oh, that was brilliant, really, really good. I've always loved Dune. That was a wonderful show, fantastic. Is it okay if I bring my family along? You know, I've got a daughter. She's like 10. If I know there's some moments in the show where the language gets a little bit coarse, but if you're okay with it, I think she would love it." I was like, "Well, you're the parents. It's on your head." And so he came back again a couple of days later with his wife and his daughter, and they loved it, and it was great. And then after, I was like, "Okay, so just to let you know, I'm up here with a school group from Essex who are doing a show round the corner, and I've told all the boys about it. They're really interested. Would you mind if they came?" So what we ended up doing was doing a second performance in the evening for this school group. So we had, like, a room that was maybe 20 or 30 teenagers, who, some of whom were interested, some of who were, like, at the beginning weren't. They were just kind of like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." Afterwards, they were apparently all raving about it for days, and about a dozen of them went to WH Smith and bought the book, which I think is probably the best compliment that I can get. And I think it's one of the things I really want people to do is go read the book. Have that experience. Like, the films are good. Most people are familiar with Dune because of maybe the 1984 movie, and of course the more recent film. There's also a Sci-Fi Channel adaptation from the early noughties, which I thoroughly recommend. It does a really good job of telling the story, albeit with relatively low production values. It's very quite reminiscent of kind of like like early Doctor Who. It's not the most technologically advanced show, but in terms of story, they get it across. But the book itself, that is the core of the experience. There's uh, so much work that has gone into the book, and like I said earlier, it's an intimidating read. It deliberately puts you on the wrong foot multiple times, but it's definitely worth it. And like I said, the audiences all loved it. Looking forward to introducing it to more people.
So one of the things I noticed was the reviews actually on the Fringe website. And the reviews on there for this show were phenomenal. And the other thing that every show needs is a Keith. If I was you, I'd be bringing Keith to every other show that you do.
Oh, absolutely. He was like one of my great cheerleaders. And yeah, like the reviews that we got, like I got on the Fringe website, like they're stellar. It was really, like, it was one of the most satisfying things. Was sort of getting up every day, checking the website to see if someone had written something new. And again, like, testament to the fan base. They have accepted me as their bard. I'm happy to to wear that mantle. If you're listening to the podcast right now and you want to read the reviews, if you go to dunethemusical.com, that'll take you to my link tree. There's a link there that'll take you through, and you can kind of scroll through them. They're very, very generous in what they said about me, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity they gave.
Talking about that generosity for those who are thinking about going to this year's Fringe or taking a show to any Fringe across the world, what are your top tips for performing?
So one is stay hydrated. Very, very important. You're going to be tired. I think, like, so. I as a personal note, I don't drink. So I don't drink. I don't get hungover. I don't feel that there's not that same, like, I think with, like, in years gone by, like like the Fringe becomes a bit of a party. Certainly for the first week, there's lots of people who overdo it, and they can end up making themselves feel unwell. And you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not doing your audience any favors. So I mean, stay hydrated and plan ahead. Like you don't have to go out and party every night. You can actually just do your show and go home. One of the really important things, like as well, is to go see other shows. Like you have your show and it's your baby, and by all means, that is your focus. That's what you want to really push. But also go see other shows, see other comedians, other performances, even if it's something that's like completely estranged from what you're making. I made a couple of friends this year. They're a duo called The Ritual, and they're vampires, and they do an improvised vampire show where you've got like the master and the servant who and they just, it's hilarious. It's one of the funniest things I've now been to see them twice. And it's all because you never know what you're going to get at these Fringe type things, and it's always worth taking a punt on something. There's another show I saw this year as well, who was a stage musician, a very reluctant stage musician. That was part of his character, but he wanted to be a rock star, and he had a guitar, and it was great. The things that you see at the Fringe are, or at any, like I said, at any of the Fringe festivals, you see things that you're never going to see again, and it might be terrible, but you'll get some great stories out of it, even from like even from like shows that like might not have been as good as you thought it was. The experience itself is enough. In terms of performance, again, like being organized, like don't put but also don't put yourself under too much pressure. And obviously there's financial implications with going away to these things. Even you want to make a profit, but the reality is that most artists who go to Fringe festivals don't make a profit, and you might just have to, like, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but try and enjoy yourself. That's the most important thing.
So tell me, what is next for Dune the musical?
So next we're doing the musical. I've got a performance booked on the 9th of December. So I'm going back to my friend's coffee shop. It's just off the Royal Mile. Tickets are available. You can go to dunethemusical.com for that link. And I'll be doing that on Saturday, 9th of December. After that, we take Christmas, New Year off. And then I've got a tour planned for 2024. So starting at the end of February, heading through towards March. I've got a number of dates booked, a couple in Scotland, a few in England, a couple of dates in Northern Ireland as well. So again, if you are in Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester, Essex, London, Belfast, Dundee, or Glasgow, there'll be opportunities there to see it. Next year, in August, as well as the Edinburgh Fringe, there's also a really big, important event taking place in Glasgow, which is it's called WorldCon. So it's the World Sci-Fi Convention. It's the biggest sci-fi convention in the world, as the name suggests, and it's in Glasgow. So I'm in touch with one of the organizers, and they're very interested in having me perform at that festival. This is all, of course, part of my my long-term plan of getting to perform with James McAvoy. So I feel I need to get this ambition out here. I need to put it out there onto the airwaves. So hopefully, maybe James will hear this and we can work together. Earlier, I mentioned how the Sci-Fi Channel did an adaptation of Dune in the early noughties, and a young James McAvoy played one of the roles in this. Now,
That's the one I saw.
yeah, is that the one you shot? Excellent.
Yeah.
Right, so you'll be familiar. So James McAvoy shows up in it. Now, that particular production does the first 3 books of the series, but they didn't do the 4th. Now, the 4th one is the fan favorite. The 4th one is the culmination of all of this stuff, and it's absolutely deranged. The story jumps 3,500 years into the future, by which point James McAvoy's character has morphed into a giant worm man hybrid creature, and basically the book is like 700 pages of just insane monologues. None of it makes sense, and it's absolutely beautiful. So people have always asked me, like, so what's your next show? What are you going to do next? You know, you're going to do the Dune Messiah? And like, no, we're going to skip past books 2 and 3, and we're just going to get to the good stuff. We're going to go to God Emperor. If James McAvoy will, that's my condition. That's the red line. If James McAvoy, if you're listening, Mr. McAvoy, I would love for you to reprieve your role as Leto II, and we can work on this. We make this show a reality.
This is an obvious question, but I need to ask it. Are you going to see Dune, the film, when it comes out later on this year?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, like I've already seen the first, like, so the Denis Villeneuve version. I've already watched it 2 or 3 times. I think that the most recent film, they've done a really good job of sort of capturing the sort of seriousness and the grandeur of the Dune worlds. They've done a really good job of bringing it into the 21st century. I think that the 1984 film, lots of people have like that's where that's what they know of Dune. That's their first introduction to it, and it's a David Lynch film. And about halfway through the film, it becomes more David Lynch than Frank Herbert. I feel that with the newer film, like they've managed. While there's always going to be changes made to any novel adaptation, but they've managed to stick to the kind of core ideas of the film. And of course, knowing where the story goes, I'm really, really interested to see what happens. For anyone listening who isn't aware, the more recent Villeneuve adaptation is taking the first book and splitting it in 2. So, I mean, not that I want to brag, but it's going to take him 6 hours. I'm doing it in 1. I can if you want to get the ending to the story, just come to see Dune the musical. You'll save a fortune.
Listen, it's been lovely chatting to you. Please come back and talk to me again when you're touring next year. But also, if you manage to meet up with Keith, that's a podcast episode on its own. I would love to talk to you and Keith. So if you are on tour and you bump into Keith again, that's one. And hopefully we can catch up at the event in Glasgow.
Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me, Barry.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.